to show you how to make this Notion carry-all bag. It's a perfect little bag to carry your notions, and it sits upright so you can leave it at your sewing machine. There are pockets on the inside and pockets on the outside, lots of little places to put stuff. And so to make this, these are the supplies that you will need. You'll need to download the pattern on how to make this. It has all the cutting instructions and the instructions that I'm also covering here in the video. You will need 3 fabrics: the outer fabric, the lining fabric, and the handle fabric. Matching thread, I'm using Aurifil 50 weight. I'm using Deco Bond Stabilizer. This is a fusible stabilizer. It adds some stiffness to the bag. The pattern tells you what size you need to cut those pieces. And you're going to need a 1/4 inch foot. I'm using my 97D foot. And optional but highly helpful is the top stitch foot, which is the 10D foot. So we're going to go ahead and get all our pieces cut, and then we'll be back to assemble. We are all cut and ready to start assembling. You're going to need to cut from your outer bag 5 pieces that are 4.5 by 10.5. 4 of them are for the pockets. 1 of them is the bag bottom. You'll need to cut 2 6.5 by 10.5 pieces. This is the bag front and back. And then you're going to need to cut 2 4.5 by 6.5. These become the bag sides. You'll need to cut the same number of pieces from the lining because we will also have pockets on the inside. You will also need to cut a 4 inch by width of fabric strip. This is what we're going to get both handles out of, and so we'll go through how to make those as well. So once you have everything cut, the first thing you need to do is take those stabilizer pieces that we said to cut in the beginning, and we're going to press them onto the wrong side of the bag part. So the 2 side pieces each get 1. The front and back pieces get 1. And again, this is fusible. I love using this because I don't have to worry about it coming apart or pinning it or gluing it. It just irons right on. So there's those, and then you'll have the 1 piece, which is the bag bottom. So we have all our pieces pressed onto the outer bag. So we're just going to set these aside for now, and we're also going to set aside the lining pieces. And then finally the handles. We'll deal with those in a minute. Next step is to make our pockets. So we're going to place our pocket fabrics right sides together. So there's the 2 outer pockets and the 2 inner pockets. So now we're going to go over to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew 1 seam across the top using a 1/4 inch foot. And then I'm going to come back and show you the next step. So over here at the sewing machine, I have my 97D foot on my sewing machine. I want to make sure that I tell my machine that is the foot I have. So now we're ready. We got our straight stitch and our 97D foot on, and we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam down 1 long side. So we're going to go ahead and get this started. To make our pockets, we've now sewn the seam across the top. We're going to flip the top layer up and press the seam to one side. Then you're going to flip the top layer to the back, making sure that seam ends up right at the top. And you're going to press that. And that will make our lined pocket. So we need 2 for the front, or 2 for the outer bag, I should say. And we need 2 for the inner bag. Now that we have flipped the fabric over and pressed this, I'm going to take this over and use the 10 foot and top stitch the edge of each of these pockets. So we're ready to top stitch the top edge of the pockets. I have the number 10 foot on. I have the needle position to -3. That is 3 clicks to the left. I'm going to use the blade of the foot along the edge of the pocket and just top stitch along that edge. All right, so we have all of those top stitched and finished. So there are our 2 outer pockets and our 2 inner pockets. The next thing we need to do is make the straps, or the handles. So the first thing we do is we take the 4 inch by width of fabric strip, and we're going to press it lengthwise in half. And that will give us a center line. Once you've pressed it, you're going to open it up and you're going to take each long raw edge and align it with that center fold line and press that. So there's that one and then this one. Okay, so once we've done that, again, we're going to fold this in half and this will give us a padded strap. So I'm going to go over to the sewing machine. We're going to put our number 10 foot on and we're going to go ahead and top stitch down each side. Now that we have top stitched our strap, our long strip of fabric, it's time to cut the strips to length. You can measure and decide what size strap you'd like for your bags. We recommend a 16-inch strip for each strap. I thought that was a nice handle, but if you wanted it longer, you could do 2 of these. If you want it shorter, just cut them shorter. We're going to go ahead and cut 2 straps that are 16 inches. So first I have it folded in half, and I'm going to go ahead and cut the straight edge on one end. Don't really need to do this. It's kind of a habit for me, but it does get rid of all the loose threads on the end. Then we're just going to flip this over and cut it. And that will give us our 2 straps. So there we go. We've got our pockets and we got our straps. Now it's time to start assembling the bag. So the first thing we need to do is add the pockets to both the lining front and back and the outer front and back. So we're going to build these at the same time because it's the same steps. We're just going to be repeating them. So I'm going to go ahead and lay this on here. And on here, and then to attach the pockets to the pieces, we are not going to sew out here on the edges. Those will get caught in the seam as we assemble the bag. But instead what we're going to do is we're going to measure and mark our pocket dividers. So you can see on this bag we have 3 little pockets in the front. So marking these 2 lines, and those 2 lines are going to divide the pockets and hold the pieces together. So for these, I did all of the pockets the same. You're going to want to use an iron off pen or a chalk pencil, something that will come out because we are drawing on the front of our fabric. And as always, I would recommend testing any marking device on a scrap piece of fabric and removing it to see how easy that will be before you mark it on your final pieces. So now what we're going to do is I chose to make all my pockets front and back the same size. You can choose to make some skinny ones for pens. You can choose to make one short and one big. You can do whatever you'd like for your pocket dividers. But for the sample, I went ahead and I measured in from each edge 3 1/4 inches and drew a line just on the pocket. All right, now that we have all our pockets marked, I'm going to go ahead and clip these together so they don't slide while I'm trying to sew them. And then we're going to hop back on over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew down each of these drawn lines. So we're over here at the sewing machine. I still have my number 10 foot on my machine. You could do this with your 1/4 inch foot, your number 1 foot. It doesn't matter, but I'm going to show you why I like to use the 10 foot. Because this little flange is going to go right on my line and my stitch is going to follow right behind it. To do that, we need to move the needle position back to 0. And then we're all set. And I'm going to go ahead and put the flange of this foot, this piece right here, right on my drawn line. We're going to go ahead and sew, and this is just going to be my guide so I know I'm nice and straight. It's a really nice feature of this foot. And when I get to the end of my pocket, I'm going to do 1 reverse stitch just to reinforce the top edge of the pocket because that's what you're going to do the most wear and tear when you put things in and out of your pockets. And so we're going to go ahead and repeat on this side. And I'm just going to do this for all of the pockets. Another great feature for this foot is doing quilting stitch in the ditch. You can do that. Anytime you want to follow a block line or a straight line, it's a great foot to have to do that. And I do recommend the D version if you have the newer Berninas because with the dual feet, it really makes it much nicer to use. We have our bag front and back done with its pockets. We have our lining back and front done. The next step is to start assembling the bag. We're going to take one of our outer bag panels, we're going to turn it around, so here's the pocket top and here's the raw edge of the pocket. We're going to take the bottom strip, which is right here, and we're going to align it with that edge. We're going to clip it in place. So we're going to take this over to the sewing machine. We're going to sew the two pieces together. We're going to make sure we start a 1/4 inch in and stop a 1/4 inch away from the edges. That is because we have to do the side pieces as well, and we'll have to do that on all 4 corners. So throughout the sewing to the bottom of the bag, you're going to start and stop a 1/4 inch away from each corner. So we're going to do that one. And then on the lining, because again, we're building them at the same time, I'm aligning it as well, same thing. Sorry, let's do it the right way. There's my bag, my pocket top edge. There's the raw edge of my pocket. Here's the bottom of the lining. Now on this one, not only are we going to stop and start a 1/4 inch away on one of these seams, so I always do it on my first seam, so if I forget, I have a second chance. You're going to want to leave about a 3 to 4 inch opening here. So you're going to literally sew 1/4 inch to here, leave this open, sew from here and stop a 1/4 inch. That is so we have an opening in our lining to turn the whole bag right side out once we're done assembling the whole thing. So I'm going to go ahead and sew this one on. Then I'm going to repeat and sew the other side. Do the exact same thing on the other side. So let's head over to the sewing machine and sew these together. So we're back over here at the sewing machine. I have my 97 foot, my 1/4 inch foot back on the machine. Over here on the side of the foot, we have these little notches. This is where your needle is. This back one is a 1/4 inch away from the needle at the back, and this is a 1/4 inch ahead of the needle. And so these little notches are going to help us stop and start a 1/4 inch away from the edges to make this bag bottom. First, we're going to position this under, and we're going to align this edge with that very back notch. Usually I'll put my presser foot down, and then I kind of slide my piece under here as needed so that that edge is right on that 1/4 inch. Now, when I go to start to sew, I am a 1/4 inch away from the edge. So we're going to go ahead and start. Now, as I'm coming up to this end, I'm going to wait until this edge is at that first notch. And that makes me a 1/4 inch away from the needle. So at that point, we just stop. And that's how you can do your stop and start a 1/4 inch away, just using your foot and not having to actually mark those. Now, if you're more comfortable marking them, go ahead and do that. I certainly don't want to discourage that, but it is nice to know that we have that stuff built into the foot on the Bernina. So we've got our back and front panels sewn onto the bottom for the outer bag, and the back and front panels sewn onto the bottom for the lining, and we've left our opening here in the lining so that we can turn the bag once it's completely assembled. The next step is we have to add the short sides onto our bag. So to do that, I like to close the piece, making sure I have the pocket as well, and I fold this back just like this. And I use a clip to kind of hold that out of my way. And then this is also going to go that way because I need to do the same thing on this side. And again, I put another clip in just to hold this out of my way. And then I'm going to go ahead and put this piece on, and again, stop and start a 1/4 inch away from each corner. And I'll repeat that on the other side. And I'm going to repeat that on my lining with the same short sides. So that will get us all 4 pieces sewn onto our base. We're over the machine, we're ready to sew our short side onto the bag. I recommend flipping it so the short side is on the bottom and the bottom of the bag is on top. That way you can see where you stopped and started when you sewed the long sides on. Now I have lights and everything in my way, so let me just fold this up. There we go. So again, we're going to put this in the machine. We're going to align the back edge of my piece with that last notch. And you should be sewing right into where you stopped on the other side. And if you're not, you can kind of position it and hand crank the needle down. That will help you. I can't say I always hit that spot. And then again, we're going all the way over to the other side, and we're going to stop right there. And there we go. There's our short side sewn on the bag, and we stopped and started a 1/4 inch away. Now we have all 4 sides sewn onto our base. So this is what it looks like on this side. And this is why we stopped and started a 1/4 inch away, because now what we need to do is bring these sides up and sew them. And they need that corner, that space in the corner to be able to pivot. So we're going to pull it up, and we're going to clip it and repeat on this side, and then we do the same thing for the lining. And so we're going to go ahead, and this time when we sew, it's easier to show you over here. I'm going to flip that out of the way, and I like to, it doesn't really matter if you start on this side or that side, but I like to start here and work my way up. It's just the way I do it. This should be a nice 45-degree angle here, and that helps you kind of align everything. So I'm going to go ahead and sew up the 4 sides on both the lining and the outer bag, and we'll be ready to put our 2 pieces together with our straps. All right, so we now have our lining sewn with our opening. If you do not have the opening, now is the time to put an opening in that bottom seam. So we have our lining. We're going to leave the lining inside out. We have our 2 handles, and then we have our outer bag also sewn, but this one we're going to turn right side out. Make sure you push out those corners. If you have a purple thing, this little purple stick thing, it helps pop out corners for you. All right, so now that we have all of that turned right side out, there we go. So there's that. So you can take this over to the iron, which I happen to have right here, and you can press the sides. Give you a nice crisp corner. And then I'm also going to press the bottom seams. So you really need to do this on the outer bag, not so much on the lining, because the outer bag has that stabilizer in it that's pretty stiff, and this will help give you your corners. Now we are ready to assemble our bag. So you're going to want some wonder clips, and you're going to put the strap on the front of the bag 1 inch away from that side seam. The strap happens to be 1 inch, so you can use that as your guide, or you can take a ruler and do it. But I just lay that on there, and then I just follow that over. Once you have your front strap clipped on, to do the back strap, I always align the 2 side seams, and I take one end and I make sure it matches up with the back one or the front one, depending on which one you started with. And then again, make sure it's not twisted, and repeat on this side. So that is our outer bag. Now you could go over and baste these straps on, these handles on if you'd like. I don't feel the need to do that, so we're going to go ahead and proceed. And to do that, we're going to take our lining, which is inside out, and put our outer bag and handles in it. That puts the 2 pieces right sides together. So we're just going to slide this into the lining, pushing it down, and then you want to align the side seams on each, the lining and the bag. And again, make sure that's pushed all the way in there. And then I just remove the wonder clip holding the strap while holding the strap with my thumb, and make sure that I catch the lining. And then just add clips as needed all the way around the top edge. And then we're going to head on over to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew all the way around this raw edge, and that will put the lining and bag together. Make sure the straps are laying between the layers. You don't want the straps sticking out at all, because anything sticking out at this point is going to end up on the inside of your bag, and anything stuck between the layers is going to be on the outside of the bag. So if you ever do a bag with a flap or anything you want in between, make sure it's in between the layers if you want it to show when you turn it right side out. We're over here. We have our inner and outer bags all clipped together, and I'm going to use my 1/4 inch foot with the dual feed. If you do not have a machine with dual feed, you may want to use a walking foot at this point because it is getting thicker, but luckily with the dual feed, we don't need to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and sew a 1/4 inch all the way around. And you just have to kind of maneuver the bag, which with the camera is a little bit harder, but we're going to do it. So excuse the bag if it gets in front of the camera. Really helps to have everything clipped, because when you're doing this, it's hard to see if things get out of alignment. And like here, my seam is twisting, so I'm going to lift my presser foot up, make sure I get that going the right way. There we go. We've got everything stitched around. All right, so we've got our bags and lining and handles all sewn together. This is what it looks like. Now, this is why we have our opening in the back. So we're going to use this opening and carefully pull the outer bag through the opening and the handles. You just want to go slow so you don't rip the fabric on either side of that opening. So there we go. So there is the outer bag. And this is why we ironed it before we did that step. And there is my lining. Now before we push the lining into the bag, we are going to press this so 1/4 inch of the fabric is inside the opening, and clip it. And I'm going to go over and I'm just going to top stitch it with my sewing machine. It will show on the inside of the bag. That's why we use the lining to do this, not the outer bag. If you do not want this, top stitch showing on the inside of your bag at the bottom, you are very welcome to just whip stitch it closed by hand. But I'm not that patient. So if I can't sew it on the machine, I don't tend to want to do it. All right, so we've got that stitch closed. And as you can see, once I get rid of my threads here, you can hardly see it. It just disappears into the bag. So it's really not obnoxious or anything like that. So now we're going to open the bag, pop the lining inside. And at the same time, we're going to start rolling this top edge so the lining goes all the way in the bag. And then we're going to take our 10 foot, I'm going to go back over to that sewing machine, and we're going to top stitch all the way around that top edge. So before I do that though, I want to make sure that I have a nice edge to top stitch. So I'm going to press this edge down. So I'm ready. I've got my 10 foot on. I've again moved the needle position over 3 clicks to the left, which is -3. I'm positioning the bag under the foot, and I want the flange of the foot to ride along the top edge of the bag. And we're just going to top stitch all the way around the top edge. And as I see the lining, if it's peeking out, I'm just going to roll it under with my finger. And this will keep the lining in the bag and the top edge of the bag nice and neat. This is also reinforcing the strap. So here it is with the top stitch all the way around. Now it doesn't have its boxy shape yet. It got its boxy shape because I top stitched down each side and around the bottom. So I'm going to go over to the sewing machine and show you how to do that. That'll help it stand up. But if you wanted it to be more organic and flowy, you could just be done at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that, and then we will be done. So to top stitch down each short side of the bag, I have the bag folded down so that the seam is nice and flat. And I'm going to use the same setting on my sewing machine, a -3. I'm using the 10-foot, and I'm just going to start at the end. And this is going to give us that boxy edge. So I find it easier to top stitch the sides by starting at the base and working up to the top, but that's personal preference, so you can decide which works best for you. And just you want to make sure that you keep that side nice and flat with the seam in between. Because basically what you're doing is squishing it and sewing that seam down so that it doesn't pop up and give you more of a rounded edge. Okay, so we have all 4 sides done. The next thing to do is the bottom of the bag. So you're just going to repeat what we did. We're just going to squish the bag out of the way, make sure this is nice and flat. You're going to start at one corner, and you're going to just sew right across. And I find the bottom is easier to do the 2 long sides first, and then do the 2 short sides last. All right, so there it is, all top stitched, the base, the sides, ready to be filled with some goodies. So I've gone ahead and filled this one up. You can see it's got rulers, my scissors, I put my BSR in here, I got my extra bobbins, a thread cutter. It will hold all kinds of stuff, and I've got stuff in those pockets, and I still have all of those to fill. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial on how to make this Notions catch-all bag. It's super fun, super easy, doesn't take a lot of fabric, and you can do it in just a couple of hours. Thank you for watching.